And here we are. What day is it today?
Hello, everyone.
Hello,
How are you guys
Rodolfo.
doing? Hi. Hi, Noseman.
Yeah, it's Wednesday, isn't it? And spring is on its way. Great. So welcome everyone to this extraordinary month when it comes to content, because you're mostly going to be watching Rodolfo do fantastic things in ZBrush. And in particular, we are going to see how we can create high quality gaming assets. And we're going to have quite a few goodies along the way for the next 4 weeks. Yeah. Now, another change we have is that we're not going to do housekeeping at the beginning, so that you can just dive in and watch the content. And we may take a break somewhere in the middle or towards the end. It depends how interesting the stuff that Rodolfo is showing is going to be, which I'm sure it is. And I'm going to forget about everything and just watch.
That's why it's recorded on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can rewatch it at your own at your own pace and your own leisure.
Now, one thing I do want to say, because it's relevant, is that if anyone has any questions relevant to the subject, I want to ask you very kindly not to ask general ZBrush questions here. We do have quite a few places where we can ask questions. Let's try and keep it relevant. And if you do have a question, please preface it with capitalized question so that we can distinguish it from general comments and compliments you're going to be throwing towards Rodolfo's way. And yeah, without further ado, I'm not going to say anything else. I guess everyone can hear us. And I'm going to save the hellos to everyone in a few minutes, because I want to see what Rodolfo has in store for us. So, Rodolfo, I'm putting up your screen. And
hey, there you go.
Let's say cheese to the camera so we can get a nice little
cheese.
And I'm going to remove our otherwise beautiful faces, our Mediterranean faces, from the screen.
So, hi everyone. So, in case you've just joined or it's the first time here on our YouTube channels, I am the ZBrush trainer for Maxon. My name is Rodolfo. And what I do, and what I did before I joined Maxon, was I was an environment artist working for games and animation, virtual production. And even before I was a ZBrush trainer, I always used ZBrush as the main core tool for the entire pipeline for modeling and texturing. And so I felt like this would be a good opportunity to just showcase the power and the core capabilities of ZBrush when it comes to video games. I was inspired very much early on by id Software, which you guys, I'm pretty sure you know if you're gamers. They had a presentation at our ZBrush Summit in 2022, I think, where they showcased that they did everything in ZBrush, including all the game assets, UVs, and etc. So what I have here is a bunch of different assets that we're going to go through throughout this series, right? We have 4 streams already scheduled on YouTube. Just in case you're not aware of that, just go down to our playlists or live tabs and click notify me in case you're forgetful like I am. You forget stuff. So you just click notify me and you'll get an email and you'll get a notification on YouTube that I think it's a day before or something, right? That you get a notification when it's going live so you don't forget. So what we have here is an example ZPR that I made. I've been building actually throughout the months alongside my general ZBrush training responsibilities at Maxon. And these are part of a video game environment that we're building internally with, mostly the ZBrush team and the Cinema 4D team. We're building the assets to go into Unreal, right, in this case. So we're building a level which includes effects and materials, and I can just showcase that real quick before diving into ZBrush and how I use this. So this is Unreal, right? And what you guys are looking is just a work in progress of an environment that we are continuously building. This little model you see over here was also sculpted in ZBrush from scratch, including the game-ready asset. This is a game-ready model, and this is the same model technically, but reusing some of the textures. And well, it's not the same model, but it's the same. It's a reuse. It's reusing the same asset as this. So this was modeled by our own ZBrush trainer as well, Ian Robinson. And everything else that you see here, there isn't one single asset that you see here, including the rocks, etc. Well, maybe with the exception of the effects, which we'll get into at a later stream. But everything else was entirely sculpted in ZBrush. Like literally, there's nothing here that you might wonder, is this mega scans or whatever? I can tell you, of course, there are some tileable textures here that are being reused in our material system, which we could get through later when we talk about going from ZBrush into a texturing package and then applying those textures into in Unreal for you to use, and maybe use Cineware. There's some stuff with Cineware that Cinema 4D has that's super powerful to do a direct link to Unreal. So in this case, we have this scene over here. And so every single one of these assets is just a reusable. These are rocks that was sculpted in ZBrush, and they're just modular, right? So you can basically pop them in and combine them, and then the texture is using a triplanar projection with a few masks that makes it look like it's one organic shape, even though it isn't. Those are just basically dozens of rocks like assembled together. So I wanted to go through today, because today is our let's say game prop modeling section, which is kind of like generic, because basically what we do is we model a modular kit, right? Or something that would be like the building blocks of the environment. And then we start blocking it out directly in the engine. And then we also mix those modular kits that might use trim sheets or uniquely modeled, basically textures, uniquely textured material. Oh, Jesus, uniquely textured models. Sorry, it's late in Germany. So and basically we combine those to make it look like it's less repeating and less modular in a sense. So what I have here is a scene with a bunch of different models that you can find on our downloadables. Actually, if you've signed up for that, we have some of these assets that I'll be showing in our description. So let's get right into it. So basically what I wanted to show you guys is a way for us. Let me just first start off with opening up this little asset here. This might take a while because these are huge ZPRs. I actually just provided in the description the Z tools. So in case you're wondering, a Z tool does not contain undo history or your document size and style. Like basically any customization you made to your project is not included in the Z tool. But I provided every single model that I'll be showing on the description. So if you want to follow along, or if you want to rewatch this later and see what you can do with those assets and try them out, maybe try your hands at something like retopologizing and then texturing something.
Rodolfo, if you may, are you going to provide the scene files?
It's in the description. There
okay,
was
okay, yeah. So they're already there. Good.
Yeah, there was a form that was sent out, and I think you have to fill that out, and then you get either the whole package for the whole like 4 streams, right, that we're doing, yes, or you get the wow, where are the rocks? Jesus, they're not here. Oh no. Oh, there they are. Okay, so there we go. So these are just a few sketches that I did that are not relevant to anything, those 2 little guys over there. But this is what I started with, because initially I thought, okay, this is going to be a cave environment. So what I did is I started sculpting a few rocks that I figured, okay, this might be reusable. So what I do a lot of the times is, as I'm sculpting, this is already kind of like almost finished actually, but it is retopologized. So I have LODs and stuff. So we're going to go through that. In this case, I have this, and then if I press my array mesh, what I usually do to preview that is that it's not there. Okay. That's fun, because it for some reason deleted this. Okay, so what I usually do is I use array mesh to just block it out and check out how it looks if I just rotate them around and check if the forms look consistent, or if they coexist naturally, if they're just clipping through each other, right? And then just make a bunch of, like, just play around with array mesh as I'm sculpting, and then I can turn it on and off and keep sculpting, and in case I just want to preview what it's going to look like. And then just keep in mind that this is going to have an RGB workflow in the texturing, where Unreal will do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to like blending those meshes visually, right? But in case you're wondering, in terms of sculpting, this is very useful for you to do, like using array mesh. We're going to touch upon array mesh a lot more next week when we cover texturing and creating tileable textures and trim sheets within ZBrush. And what I then did was I actually have UVs with this. And this is something that is very common. There's a common question that comes in constantly on my side, like how you don't do UVs in ZBrush or whatever. I do. Obviously, there's other applications for that, and there's a ton of them actually nowadays. But in this case, ZBrush, in my experience, is just the fastest one at the moment, where you just have one click and you can just get a UVs basically automatically, and they're pretty good for what they are. And then obviously what you need to do is, if you're packing multiple objects together, then you use a dedicated UV editor, whatever. But in this case, since these rocks are huge, right, they're big, they're not going to fit our textile density, so it's irrelevant if they're packed together or not, as long as they're unfolded and maximize the maximum amount of space that we have on our UV layout, let's say our UV editor. So in this case, I'm just going to start by showing you a little bit of that. So let's say I have this is sculpted. There's no UVs at the moment. There is, but let's forget about that for the sake of this example. So what I want to do to create UVs over here is I want to ZRemesh this. But first, I'm going to hold Control and tap that undo history. And what that's going to do is going to create this undo history marker over there. And this is basically kind of like a morph target, right? It's storing that information of the mesh. So ZBrush remembers the state of the mesh at that point in history. So what this means is that I can go over here under geometry and start ZRemeshing this. Let's do a same, keep groups. Maybe I want to smooth them a little bit. So keep groups going to look at those polygroups, which I created by using the slice curve brush. So actually, let me do that from scratch. So it's one polygroup. So I can go over here and slice curve brush and just start slicing. And you're going to get a perfect edge loop around that. Obviously, there's triangulation happening because ZBrush doesn't like n-gons, basically. So you're slicing the mesh to the overall location where you want your seams to be, or your edge loop. So in this case, I can go maybe like this. And in this case, I think it's going to work because this top part has some ups and downs or whatever. We could also just Control W by masking, but we can do this. So there you go. So the top section is basically one single polygroup. I can turn off line so you guys can see. That is not really what we want. So I can just isolate that polygroup and then go under my polygroups palette over here and click auto groups. And now we have two separate polygroups for that. So I can go over here and then just isolate that. I'm sorry about that. The memory is, I have Unreal running in the background. So Control W, and there we go. Now we have three polygroups. And what UV Master, I'm thinking about UV Master. What UV Master is going to do is it's going to cut this one, this shell, and those other two shells are going to be retained, basically separate. So what I need to do before any of that is I want this to be this is 5.5 million polygons at the moment. For UV Master to be fast, you want to make sure you're working with a fairly low polygon count. You can do this, but it's going to take forever, and we're on stream. So we don't want to do that. So what I managed to do is I can actually go over here with turn off adaptive size down to 0, keep groups 0.1, ZRemesh that. And it's going to try to retain that edge loop that I just created by slicing in the ZRemesh. So you could easily get away with, if it's a rock, obviously, you could get away with a ZRemeshed mesh as your game ready mesh, but basically that is not, especially if you're doing like specific shapes in your organic shapes, if it's not like a generic boulder or something. You can see this rock as a very characteristic design or shape language, let's say. So you may want to make sure that you either retopologize by hand, or that you do something like this, and then if it's organic, you can then decimate, run a DecimationMaster, and then keep UV. So in this case, it's already done. You can see that now it's 130,000. So I can even go by half, and it's smoothing, and so you can see it's basically polishing the surface, which is losing that detail, but it's okay because we tagged that undo history. And if we didn't, because I went back and forth, so I think I lost that undo history, but we can go back and control tap that. So I can just go back to this point, control tap that, and then go back to the present, back to the future. There you go. So now I can keep z-remeshing this until you get to a certain point. And what I'm going to do before I run UV master is I'm going to project back those details from that undo marker. I just close Unreal because this my laptop is annoying. Like the fans are going like crazy. So there you go. So now that I have this, I'm going to go into my UV. Actually, before that, I'm going to go into SubTool, project, and I want to turn off color. There's no Polypaint information, so we can just project history. It's going to project back that detail. Obviously, we don't have the amount of geometry needed to capture all the detail, but at least the overall shape is there. So I can now go into UV Master PolyGroup. So it's going to look at those polygroups to create the shells. And then I might have symmetry, it doesn't matter. And I could just unwrap this. And now if it's going to unwrap, so now it's 3 shells, and you can see, whoa, 10 islands. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, let me just go like this. And W, control W, and do that, control W. And let's see, why is it giving me 10 islands? That's insane. 10 islands, okay. Doesn't matter, okay. So we have this, right? Doesn't matter, it's probably like some weird geometry that we have floating around that I forgot to delete or whatever. But in any case, you're gonna get your islands. And then once you do that, you can just control D, and then go over here and project history, control D, project history, and control D again, project history.
Rodolfo,
and before we
Rodolfo?
have UVs.
Rodolfo?
Yeah.
You broke up for a second. Can you back up just 10 seconds and repeat what you were saying about, I think, UVs?
So what I said is that what we're going to do, I don't know where was I cut off.
It was just a little glitch. The general concept, I think our viewers understood. It just glitched out for a few seconds.
Yeah. Okay. So what I said was that basically what you have is the ability to create UVs using UV Master with polygroups. And then what you need to do is actually subdivide the mesh a couple of times. Let me do that again. So we have something like this, right? Which is projected with UVs. And now I can just control D, project history, and control D again and project history. Whoops. Why is it asking me to save? Okay. That is weird. Project history and control D. I pressed control S, sorry, instead of control D. So project history, and effectively what we're going to get is basically the same mesh with the same amount of detail, but with UVs. Am I cutting off again? I just saw my face going like choppy, right?
Yeah, a bit.
Okay, so we basically decided to do this just because what we want to do, project history, run the UVs, all of that. What we want to do, since this is organic, is we want to use something called the DecimationMaster. In this case, we don't need a specific like edge flow or whatever. We can easily get away with something that's triangulated and decimated. And here's the cool fact. If you're using Unreal and if you're using Nanite in any sort of way, DecimationMaster is actually the ideal way for you to work in terms of retopology, just because Nanite will look at the source mesh's ratio for triangles and quads, and then it will tessellate based on that ratio. So if we have and what DecimationMaster will do is that every time there's a high frequency detail or a small shift in planes, DecimationMaster will give you very small triangles. And whenever there's a big flat surface, it's going to give you a big triangle. And Nanite is wired to work like that, to basically look at that ratio and retain that ratio, and then dynamic tessellate it. So you're never going to need that many geometry in a flat plane, right? So DecimationMaster will prepare your mesh ideally for Nanite. So in this case, what we have here is that we have the ability to, for example, what I need to do, basically what I do is I usually duplicate this. And now if I duplicate this, I can delete that undo history tag. I can go to Z plugin and go to DecimationMaster, and I want to press this keep UVs button. And now I want to pre-process this. So now if I pre-process this, and now you can see we already have like LODs over there, but I'm just running through the entire process for optimization. In this particular case, I'm going to run through all the other features, ideally, if we have time, for optimizing and getting something that you sculpted in ZBrush into game-ready state, let's say. So in this case, it's done pre-processing because it's only 1.7 million polygons. Well, only, that's what I say, but you know. So if we go over here now, and let's say I want to do a nanite mesh. So I need something that's triangulated, that's decimated, but it doesn't really matter if it's like 300,000 or a million. So what I can get away with is maybe I want 1 million polygons. So if I do decimate current, it's going to decimate that and retain. You see, like there's bigger triangles, smaller triangles. Maybe this is too much. So we can get away with going over here. You don't need to pre-process again. You only need to do that once, as long as you don't change the name of your subtool. So we could go over here. Maybe let's do 100,000. 100,000 is more than enough for a nanite mesh. And you can see there's big triangles over here where it's a little flatter, and where there's a lot of detail, there's small triangles, right? And this is ideal for something like nanite. This is already a very high density mesh, even unless it's like the focus of your scene. So here's the cool thing. This is your nanite mesh. So if I want to do something with this in Unreal, I can just duplicate that one, and I'm going to call this nanite. Nanite. So this is our nanite mesh, and this subtool is the one that I'm actually decimating. So now if I want an LOD system, something that you would use with your LOD groups or whatever, you can auto-generate them in the engine, but it's never really as accurate as you'd want. Sometimes the popping is just crazy bad in game engines if you do automatic LODs. But in this case, we're going to look at this silhouette. And this is the most important thing for LODs, is that silhouette, right? Because the texture is going to be the same, just MIPed based on the pixel to texture pixel ratio. So what we need to do is make sure, okay, this is going to be seen from this distance, sort of. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Z plugin, and I'm going to say, okay, I want 10,000 polygons for the LOD 0. So I'm going to decimate current. So silhouette is the same. That's nice. Looks nice. So I'm going to do Shift S just to take a screenshot or a screen grab, let's say. And I'm going to go here. And what I'm going to do is actually decimate this to like half, right? So I'm going to do that. And now you can see that the silhouette remains almost the same. I can even rotate it around, and you can see it retained its shape. And I can change back and forth between the original subtool and that duplicate. That's why I retained that original subtool, just to check if the silhouette matches, and it matches perfectly. So we could actually get away with this being our LOD 0. So we can just duplicate that one and call this LOD 0. And you can see where I'm going with this, right? I don't need to do the entire thing, but let's say we're doing our LOD 4. So if we go LOD 4 might be, I don't know, 500, so 0.5. Decimate current. Uh-oh, this is not the correct one. Sorry, this is the correct one. So we want to do 0.5, sorry. Decimate current. And there we go. This is horrible. Doesn't work. Doesn't work because there's the weird geometry over there. See that? That is where the weird geometry was, over there, which is poop. But whatever. So let's forget about that right now because it doesn't really matter. We should have cleaned that We could have just isolated the mesh and then deleted that. But what we need to do right now is go over, let's try 1000, for example. Let's do decimate. All right, so this would be, obviously it's not the same silhouette, but if I do this at a distance, like that distance, and then look at over here, and I switch back and forth between the subtools, you barely notice any difference. So this LOD, which would be our lowest LOD, would be so far away that you wouldn't even notice that the silhouette is a bit different. Well, maybe you notice a little bit from this angle, but again, if this is like really far away, like that, and then you have multiple of these objects around, so you're not really gonna notice that popping as much. So this is sort of like my LOD method when I'm creating something that's organic, if it's hard surface or if it has the need for a clean topology, specifically a specific edge flow or something that obviously you don't want to do DecimationMaster. You want to go over and do something that's a little more manual. So Control N to clear that canvas, and I'm going to roll this one back till we get to that place over here. There we go. This is still decimated. There we go. So if I want to do some manual retopology, we just run through ZReMesh, or we just showed DecimationMaster with keep UVs for nanite and LOD workflows, and then you can export this with visibility sets. What I want to do right now, let's say I want to do a specific edge flow or something for retopology purposes. There's at least 3 ways you can do retopology in ZBrush, right? Manual retopology. That's what I mean, right? So this is all before we're just getting the boring stuff that I know most people are like, oh, I don't like retopology. I don't like UVs. Oh my God, why is this guy talking about retopology and UVs? If you're in the games industry, you know for a fact, especially if you're a junior, that that's going to be your day-to-day. Like, there's no escaping that. You're going to need the fastest and the most fun, or less boring, let's call it, way to do your retopology, or to do and get away with a really good result that's production ready, regardless of which method you use, right? So in this case, basically what we're going to do is we're going to run through the 3 methods. In this case, that we have the old school one, and I usually start off with this one because it's the most precise, but it's also a throwback to all of you OG ZBrush users in the audience, right? So if you guys remember this one, please ping on the chat, say, hey, I remember that. Like the member berries from South Park, you know, like just to go like, hey, I remember. Okay. So sorry, that was a little throw off. So let's go over here and insert a ZSphere. In this case, we're doing ZSphere retopology. I'm going to create a new visibility set, just isolate everything except that boulder, turn off solo mode. And what I need to do is I want to make this ZSphere clip in the middle of that model that I want to retopologize, right? And if we had, for example, a ZReMesh mesh that we want to start as a base, we can also showcase that, how to bring in something else, maybe a low poly cage or something that you have. Maybe you did some Cinema 4D auto retopology or whatever, and you wanted to use that as a starting point. We could also do that, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So in this case, we have this, and what we can do is we can go over here under our topology, and we want to click Edit Topology. Now, once we click Edit Topology, you can see we no longer have the ability to move the ZSphere around. So if I press Move, I'm not doing anything, right? So I can go to my draw mode by pressing Q, or that little button on the top, and I can start tapping and creating quads on the spot, right? And then if I press Move, I'm moving that, and it's snapping to the surface, right? So this would be the equivalent, let's say, or not actually, because there's another one that's more closely related to that. This would be the equivalent to what you have in most other applications that do retopology. So you can actually create your points and then delete them by pressing Alt, and then just connect points and keep moving. Obviously, this is more time consuming than any other method that I'm going to show. This is the most time consuming one because it's very manual and very precise at the same time. So what I usually do is I combine all 3 methods. I never use just one, right? Because this is ZBrush, right? You can combine whatever you want, create your own workflow. And my workflow uses both 3 ways to do retopology. So this is number 1. But let's say that I want to do something a little faster, where I just need to get the basic, like the overall loops, right? So let's say I want to do like a loop from top to bottom, and then I want to start modeling from there, right? And maybe I want to capture this loop over here. So what I'm going to use actually is I'm going to go to that model. I'm going to make it my active model. Let's solo this out. And I want to go to BTP. Oh, not BTP, sorry. BTO, right, not TP. TO, which is topology, for the topology brush, okay? So the topology brush is a curve brush, and I'm pretty sure if you already used any curve brush, like an IMM curve brush or an Extrude Alpha curve brush, whatever it is, you're pretty familiar how it works. It's like a curve that you draw on a surface, and then you can go over here and it snaps to that point over there. You see that? I could just do that and it's going to snap. Actually, this one didn't, but I can go over here and start attaching those points, right? I can smooth out that curve, and then I can keep drawing this, right? I'm going to delete. To delete, you just hold Alt, and then you drag over the part you want to delete, right? So in this case, I'm going to do that edge flow. I'm going to go like this, and then just draw that major line over there. And then I want to do, I don't know, let's do that, and let's do this, going over that geometry, and you can see that curve is snapping to the surface. And now what I need to do is actually start drawing the cross sections, and I'm drawing the topology and the edge flow like I would draw on a sheet of paper. Basically, I'm sketching that topology, right? So I can just go and to clean up these extra strokes around it, I can just press and hold Alt and then just drag outside. It's going to clean up any other curve that is not generating geometry, let's say, right? So if I press A, which is, it's not working. Okay, not A, sorry. I'm confusing the one with the Z-spheres. So if I tap the surface, it's going to give me that geometry, which has some thickness. Now, this might be something you want. Maybe you're building a character. You want to make some quick eyebrows. You can just sketch the topology and just tap it, and you have a thick highbrow. So something stylized or something, or like a belt. You can draw a belt or draw some straps on a character's hand, like, you know, those fist wraps, like when you're boxing or something. So this could be something that's used for that. But in this case, we want flat polygons. So in this case, I need to reduce my draw size to 1. And now if I tap, I'm going to get that geometry, and you can't see because it's clipping through, but it is unmasked. So what I need to do is actually split that. So if I go over here to split unmasked under subtool, it's now its own separate subtool, and we have that geometry. Now you can see if I worked a little bit more on this, we could start getting like the major loops. So let's say this is actually all the major loops that we have around the top, around the bottom, and then have like major curves and edge flows around here, but not everything. I never do, but this is me, right? I never do the whole retopology with just the topology brush, because it can get pretty crazy if you're doing this curve mode kind of method all the way through until the end. But in this case, let's say this is our model, right, that we have. Let's say, imagine you have like the whole edge flow. And if I want to combine this or any other method with the ZSphere retopology technique, for example, I can go over here and let me just clone that subtool. So now what I have is that little strap as a separate tool, and I can come here to my ZSphere, which we previously used for that other method, right? And I can go back to my topology tab, delete topology, and I turn off edit topology and click select topology. And now I can select that subtool. So if I select this, now my ZSphere will know that this is the topology I need to tweak. So I can now, imagine I have the whole, like the edge flows around the model. I could just use the ZSphere technique to connect all of those major loops, right, that I set on using the topology brush, because the topology brush is just so much faster at drawing like an entire edge loop, right? So then we could be precise in the latest section of the retopology process and leave the more artistic part of the edge flow, if you could call it that, of the edge flow part of the process to the topology brush. Now, there's another one, and I'm going to show it on this little guy that we have right here, which is the third method, which is ZModeler. right? Using ZModeler. And I already know what people are going to ask, right? And they're going to ask, when is it coming for the iPad? We already announced it's coming. So you guys just need to wait, right? Hold on to your seats. We're about to release that whenever we need to announce, right? So we announced that in a video. Everyone was excited. That was super cool. But I'm going to use ZModeler in this case for retopology. Now, what you need to do if you want to make your own ZModeler retopology brush is all you need to do is tweak your actions using ZModeler, right? So you can go over to an edge and you can say, I want this to extrude. I want to extrude edge or edge loop. And you want this to be snap to surface, right? Instead of free move. So now if I extrude this, you can see it's snapping to that surface. And the same thing goes for your point actions. I want to move by my point, by brush radius, but I need to snap to surface. And in the face actions, I actually want do nothing, because by accident, I could tap that and then, extrude a face by accident, and it's going to create all sorts of, poop, geometry poop, basically. So if I move this point now, it's snapping to the surface of that mesh, right? So this would be more like any other application for retopology, but it's a little faster, because let's say I want to extrude that edge loop. I could just extrude this one and then tap Alt, and now I'm extruding the entire edge loop. And now I can go over here and move, and it's going to snap and weld that. So now I have a triangle over there, and then I could just keep moving. So again, I would use this in combination with the topology brush and the ZSphere retopology if you want to be super precise for some reason in a specific area. So that is for retopology. I think we've nailed that in under 10 minutes, I think. I don't know. Am I speaking too fast? Do you guys have any questions regarding this? Is there anything that pops into your mind that you want to ask? I know I'm going crazy. I had 2 coffees, man. I'm going like like a machine gun. I don't know if that sound is the sound of a machine gun.
You're doing well. You're doing well. Let's see. I've been having some personal discussions here with my friends. Everyone is very much focused on what you're doing. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. No real questions here.
No real questions.
Well,
silence is golden. The golden silence.
Yes. We do have a question. Well, it's not a question, it's a request. I'm just going to put it out there because why not? Let me just go and find it here, because I need to find it in a different place. 1 second. Oh, where is that? Oh, there we go. So here's a question. Please, 3 pleases. Could Rodolfo do a 0 to hero 4-week style course for ZBrush for iPad?
Please.
Yeah. Do you have is there any content for ZBrush?
Yeah. We have a getting started. It's not really a 0 to hero, to be honest, but I've heard from people that are beginners and industry professionals alike that it has been useful for them getting into ZBrush for iPad. So we have a getting started series on our YouTube channel, Maxon ZBrush YouTube channel, that's called Getting Started with ZBrush for iPad. So I don't know if I can just pop that in. Let me see. There it is. So if you go to our YouTube channel, over here, you have this playlist. And if you are on your iPad, you can actually, there's a little help button. And if you click that, it's gonna show tutorials. There's gonna be a tutorials button there. If you click tutorials, it's gonna bring you to this playlist, which is the Getting Started series. And this is where we put out like the new content, anything that's new on ZBrush for iPad, any feature that was not covered on the original Getting Started series is going to go to this playlist anyway. So if you go and watch this through the end, you're going to be pretty comfortable with using ZBrush for iPad. I wouldn't say from 0 to hero, because that's a different sort of approach, right? As a former teacher, I know there's no such thing as a let's say a 4-week course that wouldn't make you, a freaking Rafael Garcetti in 4 weeks, right? That's ambitious, right? But at the same time, project-based tutorials, yeah, exactly, yeah. Right. That question.
that was right. So, ATD Films, this is the right question.
Right, right.
Because that's the kind of stuff you're going to find on the ZBrush YouTube channel.
Mm. So
Fantastic.
for project-based tutorials on ZBrush Trackpad, we still have not done that. But yeah, that's an interesting request. I might need to think about. I'll think about it.
All right, Rodolfo, think about it. There you go. You nudged. You moved the needle. You moved the needle.
Moved it. You moved the needle.
I have one more here. By Blood Rapture, is there a way to turn off EdgeLoop selection on Lasso?
Ooh, not that I know of. I never used that feature, to be honest. Like the EdgeLoop selection. You mean like this?
I don't even know what the question means.
Yeah, so if you do this, it's going to select that edge loop. See that?
Yeah.
It's going to collapse. It's not collapsing. It's just selecting that edge loop. I think that's just one of the things that the Lasso does. It's not something that you're supposed to. Well, basically, if you want to select something, I would use the select rect, because the select rect does not have that feature of selecting edge loops. Select rect would just select whatever you clicked on using Control-Shift-Tap. Select Lasso, one of its things is actually the ability to select, or deselect in this case, an entire edge loop, because this was like before, this was introduced before ZModeler was around. So you can see like the use case of this would be to select like a strip of this and then Control-Shift-X to grow that selection, right? And now you have something like this, and maybe you want to, I don't know why you'd want something like this, but whatever. You can extract this, create some thickness or whatever, and make a belt or whatever it is, right? So this would be...
Isn't the Lasso supposed to be a freeform selection? Or is
it is, but in ZBrush you have that ability. So you can select like this, right? But then you can also go over here and just tap one of those edges. You can see it looks like ZModeler. You see that? It looks like it's looking at the polygon, the edge, or the point. If I select the point, it's just gonna select, you know, whatever, like we did with the select rect, if I click the point. But if I click the edge, it's gonna select that edge loop, right? It's gonna deselect that edge loop. You can see the poop over there. That's the poop. That's the geometrical poop. So yeah, so this is a feature. It's not really, I don't think there's a way to, I'm not sure. I would have to ask, because I never turned that off anyway. The edging feature gets in the way sometimes. Yeah, I understand that. But you could also just go over here to select rect. And then instead of using a rect, you could change this to Lasso. And now you have the same ability as the Lasso. You can see like that's just how the Lasso works, right? So if you go like this, now the select rect works like the select Lasso, basically. But then it kind of defeats the purpose, right? There's no one way. Like everything that you're doing here has its own purpose. You can also just turn square on for this, and you could just do that, right? And just make sure it's always square. I don't know. There are a few things on the stroke palette that if you click center, you could do this, and then you can, you know. So there's a few things that work it's beyond like a specific brush. It's more on the stroke type, regardless of what brush you're using. The Lasso stroke type, I think, but I'm gonna answer that question at a later time, basically. But I think it's the way the Lasso works in ZBrush that does that and has that ability.
It just Blood Rapture says it gets in the way sometimes, which I can understand. Although I have no idea the last 5 minutes what you're talking about, because I do not use ZBrush. Let me bring up a very serious comment. All right, more practical workflow, less theoretical, please. Alan R, I apologize for putting Rodolfo in this rabbit hole, but I think that Rodolfo has more practical stuff to show us. And on that note, what else do you have for us?
Okay, so we've went through retopology, basically. ZRemesher, retopology by hand, DecimationMaster with keep UVs on. So what I wanted to show you is one of the approaches. This is just one, all right? There's multiple. I've shown a few before on ZBrush Live, at live events, but I could show you, again, we have a limited amount of time, but I could show you multiple ways of doing this. But let's open up our previous file that we had before. I don't want to save this because it has a poop, as we've noticed that, like geometry poop. That's what I like to call it. So let's open up this project that I had for you guys, which is the high-end game assets ZPR. And we have an example there of just a simple prop. And this is sort of like the way I model a lot of the props that I build. is that I start off with a scale reference, in this case, because it depends on the type of project you're working on, depends on the block out of your environment or your game or whatever it is. But I always use a standard scale model reference that's about the size of a player in that specific game. In this case, in Unreal, it's usually 1.8 meters tall. Like the average third-person mannequin is around that size. So I start with a human mesh something. Come on, why is this not? It's taking forever to load. It's a big project. But when I start with that and then model around that, because I want to make sure to make everything make sense in terms of UVs whenever I unfold them and pack them, I want to make sure they stick to the textile density around that same height. And you can see this in the rocks. Actually, I had the rocks here. Well, okay. We have this little guy over here, and we have a little plane, which is supposed to be the equivalent of a 4K texture. Right, this is the size, the real world scale size of a 4K texture, right? So I know that, for example, this model over here is going to fit maybe together with this one in a single texture. So when I start modeling something like, where is it? Oh, it's not here. I have to load that tool. Let me load that tool. I have a tool. Let me see. There it is. So when I start by modeling, let's say this chest, which I modeled for this stream in particular, I always start with that, and sometimes with a plane, just to make sure, okay, this can fit into a single texture, right? At least. So I wanted to show you guys how I start modeling using ZModeler and deformers, right? So let's get started. Usually, let me just start with this. Let me clone this off to a different tool. So to start modeling something like a chest, I usually start with the gizmo primitive, so I can insert something from over here, like one of the default ZBrush primitives. I don't really like this cube because it has a little pole over there, even though we might DynaMesh it, but whatever. So I'm going to start actually with a cylinder. I start with a cylinder, and then I'm going to rotate it around, do stuff like this, right? And I can scale it down and up and down. And I don't know if you guys ever use the deformers and ever use this workflow to create primitives, because you can also control and then do this, for example, and start blocking out your meshes. And if you're into characters, not really game environments, this is also something that character artists use, particularly stylized character artists, until the very late stages of the sculpt to block out the major muscle shapes, muscle groups, right, of your character. So they're using primitives. Like Shane Olson is a very prolific artist that does this all the time. He retains those different, in the single subtool, right? Those different primitives, just to make sure they are matching their proportions, right? So I have a cylinder, and what I'm going to do is one of these. We're not going to go over all of the deformers, obviously, because this is insane. I mean, we would have to have a single stream just for this one, which is the project primitive, which is the crazy. All of those cones that you see over there do a different thing, right? But it's super powerful. It's probably one of the most powerful modeling features in ZBrush, and it's underrated. So extender, this is the one I'm going to use. So in this case, with the extender, I'm going to extend this down, but you can see that little blue dot is actually going to tell me the center of the mesh. So I could do like a crazy shape like this, maybe extend it to the side. I could maybe extend it at a corner. So I can do this, for example, and then start extending like this, right? And then change that shape on the fly non-destructively, right? And then it can start modeling like this, right? You don't need to actually box model, extrude here, etc. by hand when you're starting off, right? If you're like me, and before you've met the likes of ZBrush, you always box modeled everything up until like the very end, and then you'd added a little bit of details, and then you bake, right? Then you're used to starting with box modeling, right? But there are ways where you don't need to start with box modeling. So let's go over and start doing that extender again. Let's do this. Let's reset our deformer and go extender. And what I want to do is, because I don't want this top part of the chest to raise, so I'm going to go to this little green cone, which says Y symmetry. And if I push it down, it's basically turning off symmetry into Y. So I can just push it down like that. I can turn off creasing with this yellow cone. And I can raise the resolution into Y by holding that gray cone on the top and just adding those edge loops non-destructively. Actually, I might need to make this sort of the same size as the ones we have on the top, right? So something like this would work. And now I'm going to scale this down because it's too big for that little guy we have there. And maybe this is going to be something like this. This would be like, I don't know. It looks horrible, but whatever. So we can go like this, Control-Shift-Tap, and we're going to split off that. Whoops, a daisy. See that? I need to reset this center and square. And now I want to delete that bottom part. And this is going to be my chest, right? Now, in case you don't know, with your selections, since we're talking about that with our lasso selection brush, if you have something that's hidden, which is not selected, and you're dragging to flip it over, if you hold Control and Shift and press X, it's going to expand, and S, it's going to shrink. So you can expand and shrink while you have something hidden, right? So it's basically going through the selection, growing that selection. So in this case, I think this works. So I'm going to go over to my geometry. I'm trying to use the native menus because what I usually do is I have this, which is my own custom. I work like minimalistic. I work like this, like full screen. Maybe if we turn this off, this is how I work, right? No anything in the UI, right? Sometimes I do have some custom stuff around like this, these brushes over here, but whatever. So if we go over here to our geometry, modify topology, and delete hidden, now we don't have anything over there. And I can go over to my ZModeler and insert and alt tap. Oh, by the way, if you want the ZModeler retopology brush, there's one in the Lightbox. Just, because I remembered, because I was just looking at that and I remembered I set ZModeler to be a retopology brush. There's already one that's preset and already done for you. If you go to ZModeler, there's the ZModeler slice, which is kind of like your multi-cut tool, right? And your ZModeler topology, which is basically the same brush with different settings, right?
By the way, Rodolfo,
Yep.
you're blowing people's minds away. Jags, what's up?
What's
next
up?
Shortcuts.
Yeah.
Holy oops.
Holy
Yeah,
Control Shift X.
Alan R. This is awesome.
That's gonna be the new curse word that we have internally. Holy Control Shift X.
Yeah.
Control Shift X.
All right.
Holy X. Okay.
Keep going.
All right. So we have this, and we just deleted that edge loop, right? And what I need to do, I can just close holes right now. So I'm going to go again to Geometry, Modify Topology, close holes. And now we have this, which is, again, we have this issue right over here. So what we can do is we can still use ZModeler with bridge and to just start bridging this as you would in any other application, right? And if you close it now, basically, if you look, I would just still bridge it. It's going to do this, and then you can just delete that edge over there, and it's done, right? So what I want to do to start modeling this, and this is if you're going the ZModeler route, right? If you want to start by box modeling everything and basically go from there. In this case, we're going to show that. So I can go over here, whoops, and go to our QMesh on our ZModeler, and I can start, actually not QMesh, PolyGroup Flat Island, and I'm going to just create a few polygroups that I know I'm going to use. Like this one actually could be a different polygroup. And now, again, with my selection brushes, I'm going to tap that one and that one. And now this is going to be its own polygroup. So Control W to polygroup by masked, which if you don't have a mask, then it's just going to, change the polygroup. There we go. So now we have something like this. And now what we have to do in terms of like ZModeler, this is what I usually work with. You have to go to your dynamic subdivision. Well, you don't have to, but you can. And dynamic subdivision is our way of showing like what it's going to look like when it's subdivided. It's kind of like your subdivision preview in a sense, right? So the yellow dots that you see over there are the actual points that we have in our mesh. And you can see my ZModeler is still looking at that original mesh. So D and Shift D, if you don't have any subdivision levels, D is going to turn on that dynamic, and it's going to tell you, hey, currently this mesh has 0 subdivision levels. Would you like to auto activate the dynamic subdivision? And you're going to say always yes, because that's what you always want to do, right? So we're going to have that, and then I can control how many subdivisions I want. I can control, maybe I want thickness. So we're going to take a look at that later. And maybe I want, I don't know, maybe I can crease, right? So the creasing and the dynamic subdivisions in combination are going to be paramount. So we have some polygroups, right? So you can go in Crease PG, which is Crease Polygraphy, for anyone who knows, right? It's not Crease Polygraphy, I'm sorry. Crease Polygroup, right? So Crease Polygroup is going to crease every single polygroup border around our existing polygroups, right? So, and now you can control non-destructively the crease level while your model is being previewed, right? So you can do this, for example. You can add like 6 smooth subdivisions and a crease level of like 4, and you're going to get this hard-ish surface that you have over here. I could still go over here while it's under dynamic subdivision and go to my insert single, maybe multiple edge loop, keep polygroups, and then just do this on the fly while it's subdividing technically. So let me actually lower that crease level so you guys can see more clearly. So if I do, like, for example, crease level of 2, it's rounding out, right? And it's giving you that weird pinch because we have a pole over there. So we can go like this, maybe on the fly, and then go to this face and maybe inset polygroup island, or actually polygroup all, because we have a same polygroup on the other side. So we can do this, just to inset that, hold and tap Alt while you're holding your pen on that polygon to alternate between the different polygroups, right? And now if you do like Crease PG again, you're going to have cleaner, basically a cleaner edge loop around that model, right? It's not as clean over here. But that's because of the creasing, right? It just works differently. That space is not the same. That distance as well. Like we have less geometry over here than we have over here on the top, which means we could just insert an edge loop over there, but then we're going to get that issue. So there's multiple things you can do over here to fix that as well. We can just inset that polygon, for example. But at the end of the day, this is going to be sculpted on. It's not really like you're building a mech or something, or a car or whatever that needs to be like perfect in terms of like its topology. But you could. That's what I want to. That's the point I'm trying to drive home, right? Is that you can do all of this stuff in ZBrush. It's not like it's not unprecedented. So there even before ZModeler, people were doing hard surface in ZBrush, but whatever. So in this case, we have this, right? And what I can do is I can go over here and I want an alternate polygroup now. And let me turn off that dynamic subdivision by pressing Shift D. So D and Shift D turns that on and off by default, as long as you don't have any subdivision levels. Because if you have subdivision levels, obviously your D and Shift D are going to go up and down your subdivision levels. So then I'm just going to do this, for example, over here. And I'm going to do this. And I can just tap, and it's going to repeat that, right? So we have, like, you can see where I'm going with this, right? I'm just going to do this. And now we have that same polygroup that you have over here. Whoops. This could be like our frames for that chest, right? So what we need to do actually is, and let me go over here. Actually, that polygroup, I want that polygroup to be part of this one as well. So I want this one to be, let's say, Flat Island. I wanted this to be one single polygroup. And then I can polygroup by polyloop. So it's going to go around that polyloop. But I want the polyloop within that polygroup. So let's say I want I know this is confusing. So polyloop and polygroup means it's going to go around the polyloop, but just stop whenever it meets a different polygroup, right? So we can go like this, and I'm changing that polygroup, right? So I can go, for example, and borrow this polygroup over here, right? And maybe I want to do this, for example, and I can do maybe that polygroup over there, and I can maybe borrow that polygroup by holding Alt, painting that polygroup, and then letting go of Alt and holding Shift to basically copy that polygroup over there. So now if I do this, it's going to look at that previous polygroup that we had. So this is something I used to tell my students all the time. if you want to know ZBrush like the back of your hand, there's two things that you need to master, by the way. This is regardless of which industries you're working for. It's polygroups and masking, basically. You understand polygroups and you understand masking, you understand 99% of the features in ZBrush, because they, at some point, every feature in ZBrush uses to some extent either polygroups or masking or both, right? To do whatever it's doing. So if you understand that, then that's going to make your life easier. So if I want to do this, right? So I'm going to duplicate this one just because I want that sculptable, let's say, wooden part of that chest over there. So I can go over here and start Q meshing by polygroup all, and then just Q mesh that section over there, sort of like this, right? And now I have this, which is going to be my wooden section, right? And I can now Q mesh this one, holding Shift. Let's see if you guys can see what I'm doing. Holding Shift to inflate that a little bit, right? So now we have something like this, which works fine for what we're going to do. We're just going to sculpt a metal section, and we're going to sculpt a wooden section. Now, again, I might need to crease this again. So I'm going to go over here to my crease menu, and now I want to crease by angle, 4 to 5 degrees. So any shift in 4 to 5 degree angle is going to get a crease, right? So this would be something maybe that I want to raise my crease level, because it's made of metal. It's supposed to be more hard surface-ish. Well, it's actually is hard surface, right? So this would be like our wooden portion, and that would be our metal portion, right? Now, there's other ways where you can design your patterns, and this is something that comes up all the time when we're talking about how to concept stuff, how to bring reference into ZBrush when you're starting to model the modeling process in ZBrush, right? Because this is what I do all the time. I start and end my modeling process in ZBrush, never leave the application, right? So to concept out a piece of geometry, so let's say I want to start designing patterns or whatever. Let me duplicate this again, and I'm going to go in and apply that dynamic subdivision. Sorry for using that hotkey. So now we have the actual subdivision levels. If I apply that, you can see I'm going up and down. Shift D and D now just go up and down our subdivision levels instead of turning on and off dynamic. And I want to delete lower. So I'm going to go to my geometry, delete lower. And in this case, I just want to DynaMesh this. So I'm going to drag that resolution. This is something that blows everyone's minds because it's been there since forever, but people don't know it's been there. So if I go over my DynaMesh under my DynaMesh subpalette, right? And there's this little resolution slider, right? If you click and drag, now it's a picker. So I can pick the geometry on my model. In this case, it's all very consistent. But if I do this, it's supposed to change based on what I'm seeing right now. So I could do this and let go, and it's going to pick that resolution to be optimal. So if I look at this, let's say I want this density all over my mesh, because this is a little horrible. So if I click DynaMesh now, it's going to have that same density. It's the exact same density, even though it might have reduced some of the geometry or increased because this has poles, right? So it's not ideal. So let me do that again for you. Just do that. You can see the resolution slider changing as I'm moving it around the mesh, right? And then click DynaMesh. And now it's going to retain that particular resolution that I picked. So in this case, we have 1.6 million. And let's say I'm designing shapes here. Let's say I want to design a specific shape. I want to, in what you would do traditionally, if you're a ZBrush user from long ago, basically, most people know this technique, which is you design by masking, right? You mask something. Maybe you want to sharpen that out, blur it out, and then sharpen it again. And then you design something like this. This is perfect. Look at that. It's beautiful. Beautiful. So if I go over here now, under my subtool, I can extract that as a mesh. That could be double-sided or single-sided. So I can do that, extract, and now I have a little panel over there. And I can maybe smooth that. Extract. It's non-destructive. It's not applying yet. So I need to actually apply that before moving into anything. So I can change that thickness. I could maybe do like a flat plane. So go put 0 there, extract. So now we have a flat plane over there. This is something people use for cloth, for example, when you're drawing like a shirt on your character's body, and then you just extract that and ZRemesh it, and you're done, right? So This is something that most people know, but what I want to show is something else. There are multiple ways you can do this, but let's say I'm going to turn on ghost mode and I'm going to go to my mask brushes, and we have stuff like Mesh Extrude, MeshExtrudePro, Mesh Project. So Mesh Project, I can draw a mask. Whoops. I can draw a mask like this. And what you're going to get is a mesh that is projected upon that surface, right? With a specific thickness. So in this case, Z intensity will control your thickness. So if I lower that Z intensity and I do the same, it's going to be thin, right? And your draw size, I don't think controls anything in this case. It's just the Z intensity. So that is it. If you want to change that bevel that it does, you can go over to our brush. Let's dock this over here. And under our mask mesh modifiers, if I hold control, because it has to be selected, I can increase the resolution of that mesh. So if I do this, for example, now that is a little denser than that, right? You can see that resolution up and down. Not necessarily this, but you can see it's already dense as well, like way more dense than that. And the bevel, you can also change that bevel, do something like this, then mask this. And now our bevel is very, very small. And you can run a smoothness, which is basically a polish by groups, right? Because it's giving you those polygroups, which could be super useful for something like live booleans. If you're just booleaning something, it's going to give you that polygroup, which then you could use to ZReMesh it, right? So we're not even touching hard surface techniques, because this could be used for hard surface. But in this case, I'm just using it to design a shape, for example. So I can go maybe like this. Maybe like this. I don't know. Let me just do some weird designs over here. Oh, it's not working. It doesn't work with the thingy on for some reason. Might look into that. So let me do, I don't know, some weird design over here. And now we have that shape, right? Which we can then mirror, right? So we can go over here. Maybe I want to split this. So I can go split unmasked and go over here and just mirror this. You can mirror and weld. So you can go over here and put this on the center of the grid, which is the center of the chest anyway. And then just go ahead and geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld, right, on the x-axis. And now we have something like this. Like that's, I don't know, it's an ugly design, but whatever, you know what I mean? So you could do like ornaments. You could do like, this could be metal. And then you have like the wooden section showing underneath. Right. And the cool thing is that you can do this with the MeshExtrudePro as well. But this is actually going to do something like that. It's going to do a flat surface. Right. But the benefit of this is that you can go with your lasso stroke type. And let's say, let me do this again. So I can do, for example, like a shape like that. And now I can hold this, but then Alt to, whoops, it's not, oh, wow. What is it doing? What the heck? There we go. Okay. For some reason, it gave me another subtool. So if I do this and then do that, but with Alt, it should delete. What the heck? It's just giving me another polygroup. Okay. It's giving me another with a subtractive on. It should just design it, whatever. So, well, basically, if you have live booleans on, I think that's the problem. Okay. Let me go back, do that again. There you go. With live booleans on, it's just going to give you an extra subtool, so it's even less destructive. So if I have actually turn on live booleans and go like this, it's actually subtracting those meshes that we just created. So if we don't have live booleans on, though, we can still keep designing shapes like this. And you can see it rounds out the surface because it is polishing. So if I reduce that smoothness and do that, you can see it's a little sharper, right? And we could start designing our shapes like this as well, right? So there's multiple other features that I could show you just how to design shapes in 3D directly. One of my favorite ones, though, and this is something, I know we're going off tangents here, but one of my favorites is using Spotlight. And I wish we had more time to talk about that, because Spotlight is its own thing, right? It has its own universe for creating reference images and bringing in reference images into ZBrush, right? But just in case you guys are wondering, there are two ways for you to use reference images in ZBrush that might be useful to you, right? Number one is Spotlight. Number two is your draw. So you have like your image planes, let's say, in ZBrush, right? Which are super powerful. And I don't know if we have time to touch on that, but that's a whole different ball game. It's just on a completely different level. So if I go over here, and let me actually go to like LightBox to Spotlight, and I'm going to bring in my hard surface. Like we have like some Spotlight templates over here that you guys can use. So I'm going to use, let me see, this one maybe. I don't know. This is too sci-fi-ish. So let me just use a more basic shape. Yeah, something like this, right? So what I can do is while I'm in Spotlight mode by pressing Z, I have this little old school dial, and that's how you know I'm old, because I remember these from like being telephones, basically. Like you just go like, and then it goes go back, like you do this, like, and then you type in the number, right? This is how you'd work. And it's the same with Spotlight, right? So Spotlight, every time you press something, and then you have to hold it like on a dial telephone, right? You're just going around that Spotlight. So in this case, I want to design a shape. So I'm going to bring this one. I'm going to actually tap that one to select it, snap that pivot to the center, and you can see it's looking at the mesh as well. So I can go over here, for example, and it's going to look at the mesh center or the mesh mid-edge. I could go and snap that to specific parts of the mesh. In this case, I want it to be in the center, so I can do something like this, for example. And now what I have the ability to do is actually I can repeat that pattern. I can repeat it like this, for example, which I don't want, but I might want that. And let me turn off that so I can see what I'm doing in terms of design. So I can extend this as well. So like the extender that we just showcased using the gizmo, but in this case, it's a 2D extender, right? So I can go over here to my extender and just extend this out, right? And maybe make it like that, for example. And I'm going to turn off everything except that because it's getting a little messy. So let's say I'm going to do this, right? And I like, okay, this is a cool design. I like how it is, but I want to add some inconsistencies over here. So what I could do, we have a Boolean system inside of Spotlight. It's basically a Boolean system. So we could go like with this diamond shape, for example, this diamond shape, and then just bring it over like that. And what I can do is I can start repeating that, for example, like that, right? And then I can scale it up and scale it down. I can extend each one of those like that, and then just drag it up. Let me scale it up like that. And what I can do, because I can also snap this to the image center, and then go over here, and there's a little union button. If I alt tap that, it's going to delete, basically do a union, right? It's not going to work probably because this image is not made for this, but whatever. So if I do a union, it's going to weld that, even though it isn't. Wow, okay, it's not working. But let me see if I can, maybe it's the opacity. Let me bring the opacity to the maximum. And again, your pin spotlight needs to be 0. And then hold Alt and tap that, and it's not giving me the cut, but whatever. Let's go back. Let me try to do just with a simple triangular shape like that, for example. Actually, let me do this like that, right? And again, opacity to the maximum. Whoops, opacity and union. Oh, it's repeating because it's repeating, obviously. Oh, Jesus. Sorry, guys, late. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to first design one, and then go and repeat it. So there's an order to things, like with most things in life. So if I do this, now I have a union there, and that is the image. So I can do the same thing, but with a subtractive one, and I'm cutting that. So I can use different images to just subtract and subtract like so. I could even maybe extend this, maybe do like shift. Whoops. Why is it not? There we go. Maybe make this a little taller. I don't know. This looks horrible, but whatever. And now I can just go like this and mirror this image, right? So I can go and mirror by pressing shift and this little button. And now if we have this, we can hold and click this snapshot 3D, and we have that image. We project it as a mesh, right? So we can do this, and you can see how useful this is if you have reference image, and now you have a 3D model that's based on your reference image, right? Because you can also, if you go to and load any reference image, I don't know if I have any here, but let's look at the texture. Let's see if we have something. Maybe not. Maybe we don't. Let me see. No, we don't. But if you add a reference image that has like a background, like a black and white image, basically, you can either turn it to black and white and using Spotlight, or and then you can project that, right? So you can just project a 3D image, your 3D image as a model. And also, if you go over here to Paint, and now you turn your paintbrush on, you go on and select your paintbrush. Let me just move this this dial out of the way, and I'm gonna reduce that draw size, and I can effectively start painting away shapes like so. For example, I'm gonna paint that away like that, paint that. Maybe this looks a little like, you know, I don't know, just start painting away. And then there's a little part that's like a little bit black, but it's not full black. If it's full black, then it's going to be transparent. ZBrush looks at a PNG, for example, and reads that as opacity. So you hold Control and then you tap that. Let me just tap that with the intensity on, with the paint mode on, actually. And hold Control. What the heck? Okay, there you go. And hold Control and drag, and it's gonna go and basically do a tolerance check. See that? It's basically like an histogram scan in a sense, right? So you're doing this, and then you project, and you're gonna get a mesh that is exactly the shape that you want, right? And then you can just project it on the surface. Now, if it's straight, like that mesh project method, what we could do, and I know I'm going off on a real tangent over here, but bear with me. So if I scale this down, let's say, let me turn off that one. And we can also just project a negative of this. So if we go like this, for example, let's say I want this projected over there, right? So what you could do is you could go, there's a brush, what was it called, damn it? There's a brush called oh, that's not the extractor. Oh, Jesus, old school. Jesus, I forgot. It's the wrap something. What was it called? Mesh project with live Boolean on. Yeah, you can. So basically, if you have live Boolean on, if you go over here, if this is what you're thinking, like the snapshot 3D. So let's say I want to rotate this like that, holding Shift, scale this down, go like this. And now, if instead of just tapping that screenshot 3D, hold Alt and tap that, and you're going to get this. You're going to start cutting your mesh, right, on the fly using that image, right? Obviously, what this is doing is just adding another subtool with the subtractive mode on, right? But it's doing all that work for you, so you can easily just ideate, right? So, yeah, I'm talking nonstop, guys. So if you have any questions,
okay, question time. Question
yeah,
time. Okay,
please do. I need to drink some water.
Yeah, have some water. A quick one from earlier, Alice Fonzo. When you talk about texturing in ZBrush, do you mean texturing with Polypaint, or
No.
is that the way to do it?
So I don't texture in ZBrush. You can Polypaint in ZBrush, and I use that for texturing. But when you're talking about texturing, it means making a texture, which means you're painting a 2D texture that's going to unwrap around a 3D model using your UVs. And that for that, you have dedicated tools such as like Substance Painter or something like that, right? But if you want to speed up that process, so let's say in this case, if I look at that other chest that I was designing, right? If I want to have like the low poly be one single mesh, let's say, instead of having like all these separate meshes for each part of this chest, if I want the low poly to cover this entire area, but I want to distinguish between, for example, this iron or steel or whatever, and this wood, I would apply Polypaint to that just so Substance can read that and make a mask, right? Because Polypaint is vertex color. Matchmaker, that's it. Someone in the chat, give that man an award. Matchmaker, that's the brush, right, that I was looking for. So you can see, like, I forget, man. I forget names. I forget everything. That's it, Jonathan. Woohoo,
Thank you, Jonathan.
You just won. You just won today. Matchmaker. That's an old one.
You won an applause. There you go.
Yeah, you won an applause. That's it.
Okay, wait. We have a dumb question here.
A dumb question.
Rapture,
I love
I
dumb
have
questions.
to tell you. Yeah, but I want to say one thing. There is no dumb question.
Yeah,
Like,
that's my number one rule.
So. Even if it's an easy question, it's never a dumb question.
Right.
Otherwise, you would not have asked it. Okay. So Blood Rapture changed the Z hotkey to ZModeler, and now the spotlight selection doesn't work anymore. How?
Sorry, don't go change my Z hotkey to ZModeler. Okay. How do I fix that? So how do you bring back that hotkey being spotlight instead of ZModeler?
Yes.
Is that the question? That might be it. If that's the question, then it's easy. So to set up a hotkey, all you need to do is go over any button that you want, Control and Alt to set the hotkey, right? And what you're doing when you're doing this, turning on and off spotlight, is you're doing this, right? You're turning on and off over here, right? So this is your Shift Z. So it's this. And then Z is actually going into spotlight mode, which is, where is it? Oh, Jesus. That was another thing over here. So you mean Z or Shift Z? Because Shift Z is working. So if you had, whoops, let me see if I can. How did you put a hotkey to the ZModeler? Where is the ZModeler? ZModeler, there you go.
Z, not Shift
Z. Okay. So if I do Z, it still works, right? Even though if I turn off spotlight, so I just set that hotkey and it works, so it should work. If I do that, so go to ZModeler. Let me go customize, because sometimes you might need to do that, or go to brush over here. Where's the ZModeler? Let's say this one, right? And I press Z. All right. Okay. So now if I press Z, it's going to switch to that ZModeler. But if I have spotlight on, oh, it's actually not working. That's a good point. I have no idea. Thank you for bringing that up. I thought that would work regardless, because I already had that at one point. Okay. That is a good point that we
Okay, now revert it.
Revert it?
Alan,
so basically, what you want to do is you want to go to Preferences, go to your hotkeys, and just restore your startup hotkeys, because you have a startup file. That's the startup hotkeys. So if you do that,
what if you have 25 other Hot Wheels? Sorry, my kid is my son is 11 and he plays with Hot Wheels. So hotkeys, not Hot Wheels.
I would have to get back to you, because I do know that there's a button that does this. There's a button that does this, right? This is referring to something, right? That is doing over here, but I'm not sure what it is, because I don't use it. I just use the Z button. But in case you want to change a specific hotkey, you can go to that file, to the hotkeys startup file, and just change that one specifically, right? So there's a text file that is basically our hotkeys file. What if you want to migrate to another computer or something? That's the file you're going to take with your hotkeys. If you open that up, there's all your hotkeys listed there. So you can just go over there and basically change that specific hotkey. That is how I would do it. Yes, exactly. Edit the hotkey file and change that. Or again, if you have like 30 other hotkeys, for sure. If not, just restore.
Did you read Alan R's comment? I think Control Alt to reassign the hotkey.
Yeah, so I have ZModeler slice in this case. So if I have Control Alt and tap, Control Alt and tap, and then Z, do this, right? If I Control Alt and tap again, and press Z, it's gonna basically already assign. It's not gonna do anything, right? It's just it's still like let's go clay buildup and then press Z. It's gonna go to ZModeler, right? So I usually do it. This is just advice, regular advice. Whenever ZBrush has already a hotkey that's set for that, and you want, for example, B is already there for brush, right? But I have this as well, and I have this, which is your live Boolean. So what I do is I use the combinations of Alt, Shift, and Control with that particular key. So if Z was already set to Spotlight, you could maybe do Alt Z, for example, or something, or macro to go to your ZModeler. instead of just setting it to Z, right? Because Z is very common. It's a key that's used all the time in every 3D application. Like Z is very, like Control Z wouldn't change that, right? Because that's like universal, right? Control Z is something you wouldn't change. So I would say maybe Alt Z or something, and check if it has a hotkey already assigned to something. Whenever ZBrush gives you that warning, is because there's something that's rather important that already has a hotkey assigned to it.
But
So
it's a good,
I would, yeah.
A good piece of advice is, if you want to have some fun, just go to your colleagues' computers and mess up their hotkeys. No, don't do that. But that'll be fun to watch. You know, April Fools. Make sure that their projects are backed up.
Yeah, like, but back up their hotkey file, their original hotkey file. Otherwise, you might get fired. You know, like,
just don't tell anyone you did it. You know, that's
oh, that's the key.
Okay,
right.
What else
get it?
Do we have?
That's the key.
Rodolfo, show us more.
All right.
More.
So for this segment, I mean, we have so much stuff that I could show you guys, like for reference and stuff like that, like how to bring in reference, how to start modeling, let's say. So we could go on and on and on for all we know, for eternity, to do to basically create this in various different ways. So yeah, let me just show you the matchmaker, because that was the brush that we were looking for last time, but there it is, matchmaker. So what this does, it's basically a drag rect. If I just drag that, it's going to match that curvature. Obviously not, it's not perfect because it had that subtool intersecting there. So if we do this, it's going to match that curvature of the next subtool, and then I could just move this into place, sort of like this. Right now, it's matching that part of the subtool, which I don't want. So in this case, I might turn off that one and then just go like that, and it's projected. And now I can turn that back on and then maybe move it out a little bit. And now we have that design, which we just made with whatever tool that you guys want to use, because we just have a bunch of them that we just created. Now, if we're designing, for example, that particular shape, like let's say we want to use, you could use live booleans with clip. Like another method would be something like duplicating this. So I can duplicate this, inflate it just a little bit. So I can go over to deformation and inflate it just a tad like that, right? And then go over here, and I want to make sure that I have a start group over there. And now I can insert, for example, a massive cube, which effectively, if I turn on live booleans and put this in subtractive mode, what I'm doing is I'm just cutting that shell that I just created with that inflate, right? So what I could be doing is I could be, instead of doing a subtractive, do an intersect. So it's only going to show whatever is inside of this cube, right? And now I can start basically DynaMeshing that cube, and I could start going crazy with maybe my knife curve brush, maybe do something like this. You can see I'm already designing that shape. It's going to crash, isn't it? Yeah, and it's going to crash. It's an own bug. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. What happened?
Okay. Yeah, it's going to crash. This is a known bug. This is a bug that we're aware.
Okay, what we're going to do, let's quickly do a housekeeping. I'll do a housekeeping very quickly.
Yeah.
And paste a few things for anyone that doesn't know or wants to be reminded. I'm going to paste a link in the comments. This is being streamed on 3 YouTube channels: the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, the Maxon YouTube channel, and the ZBrush YouTube channel. And as far as being recorded, it's probably going to be on the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, where we're going to host the recorded ones. Now, if you click on that link I posted, it will take you to this page here that has the events over here, the link to Synoversity. Sign up if you want to receive news from Maxon, and the Training Team YouTube channel. You can also ask your questions for the Ask the Trainer session. We have one tomorrow, and you click here and you go through the links and you ask your question. I get the spreadsheet and I check the questions and try to go through as many as I can, or you can join us on the show. Now, if you go to the events, we have all these nice curated events for you. Look at this beautiful chap here. These are the trainers that have been planned. This here is the great stuff that Rodolfo is making. Anyhow, the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel is where we're going to get everything hosted after the fact. Maxon YouTube channel where we're watching live, but it also has tons and tons of presentations and project breakdowns and all sorts of events. This is where most of the events go. By the way, I'm going to be at NAB. Come and join us if you're in Vegas this year. Yeah, I haven't been there since 2019. And of course, the Maxon ZBrush YouTube channel that has so much stuff. I don't know if, yeah, if people have enough lifetime left to watch all the content we have. Of course, go to Cineversity and watch the tutorials, especially the ones I've made about nodes if you're interested in Cinema Body. So scene nodes, 21 is the count at this point, plus some older ones. And also, go to ZBrush Live. Let me paste this in the comments so you can go and this is the calendar where all the ZBrush Live shows are linked. And of course, go to ZBrush Central. Wow, it's
all things ZBrush.
Yeah, the thing is that this depresses me because I'm not an artist. I'm an engineer, self-educated engineer, and I watch these things and damn, I feel jealous. No, yeah, I feel a lot of respect for the people that do these things, but I'm jealous as well because this is extraordinary talent. And even if you're talented, you need to work extremely hard to get to the point where you can actually do these things. And I'm too lazy. I don't have the patience for this. Look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
Anyway, well, come on. I'm digressing here. So, yeah. Oh, thank you, Blood Rapture. I'm gonna go this.
You're an artist. There you go.
I'm not, but thank you very much anyway. Okay, let's switch to Rodolfo's screen again and remove our beautiful Mediterranean faces from.
Right. So yeah, after that little crash, yeah, you're right. Knife brush is a little risky. I'm sorry, because it does have. We are aware of this issue. We have engineers working on that. So that it was my bad. I should have known about that. This is the tease for next week, by the way. It's just how to make trim sheets using ZBrush. And this is just a tease. I'm such a tease. And then again, titleable textures with Polypaint. Again, what someone was asking about doing texturing or using Polypaint. This is what I use Polypaint for, right? So I'm using Polypaint to mask, in a sense, parts of that sculpt that I want to be different materials. So then when I bring it into Substance, it's going to bake that as a basically a color ID, right? Because it's still vertex color Polypaint. So I was going to show you, this is another titleable texture. Oh, did I not import that? Oh, I didn't. Let me load that tool again. Okay, I can only load one Z tool at a time. There we go. Say, okay. There we go. Is it going to take forever? Probably. Yes. Let's see. All right. I don't know if we have time for this, but I just wanted to showcase using the same kind of workflows. What you can achieve is, for example, I have this door that I wanted to add to that dungeon. I want to have some sort of door because otherwise, it's a dungeon that has no doors. So you want to have a door. So I thought, okay, let me just start thinking, how can I use these workflows to come up with a door and then have it be modular in a sense where I can, because you're going to already tell that when I unwrap this, it's not going to fit in a UV, 0 to 1 UV for 4K, for a 4K texture, which is a first-person shooter kind of textile density, right? Like 4K for 4 meters, 1024 textile density. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to be smart about this. So this was using the same workflow that I just showed you with Mesh Project, right? Where we're just cutting sections, etc. And then what you can see is that this other side is actually an arrayed version of that. So this is the actual model that we're going to bake. We're probably going to bake it together with this wood with different Polypaint colors. So if I go to my SubTool, turn on Polypaint, and I want to do is what I want to do is start applying that painting, is going over here and having pure blue, pure red, or pure green to separate the material. So in this case, I'm going to go to color, and actually I want to turn on RGB before that, and fill object. And now if I switch that back to my white color, that has a blue color. So this could be, for example, red color. So I could go over here again, go to my red, whoops, and fill object, right? And now if I go back, switch back to my white, you can see this is always red. Now that is going to be cut. I could just cut that with live Boolean. So I have, this has Booleans. If I, whoops, turn on live Boolean. Why is it not working? It should. Oh, there it is. Okay, this is turned off. There we go. Because it conflicts with the array mesh sometimes, because what array mesh is doing is a rendering thing, right? So, and if you're bullying at the same time that you're arraying, it could not, in the arrayed version of that mesh, it's not going to show properly. But if I turn off array mesh, you can see it's cutting off precisely where it needs to cut off. So once I apply those Booleans, I'm going to get this as a separate mesh, right? This cut off as a separate mesh. Everything as its own separate mesh that I can just bake on top of that. Same thing goes over here. So this is also modular, this other section. Let me turn off live Booleans because sometimes it doesn't allow me to select stuff. So this is also a modular arch. Let's say it's not finished by any means necessary. It's still stuff. There's stuff that is still just surface noise that you can see. And as you can see, I was still starting to sculpt that rock, that rocky shape, right? And then this is the same thing, and I'm actually going to bake one side and the other. So this array is actually a little bit more complex. I arrayed it and mirrored it from one side to the other. And then what I can do is in the engine, this is going to be duplicated over there and just rotate it around. And you're not going to notice that it's the same mesh because the back is made one way and this side is made another way, and it has different texturing details, right? So the same thing goes for this section. So what I do is effectively what I'm going to bake is just this. This is what is going to go into substance. So even this is arrayed. You can see that over there. So if I turn on live Booleans and I want to turn off that one, this is what it's going to be sent out from ZBrush into substance, right? Like the low poly, I mean, right? And then you're going to bake that color as your color ID in substance. And then you're going to basically do that, duplicating that array, let's say array mesh in the engine itself, right? So this is just a way for you to preview what the actual asset is going to look like at the end of the day, while you're still working on your modular version of that mesh, right? Because I know that in games, modularity is kind of like everything, right? And how well optimized your environment is related to how modularly do you work, in a sense. So reusing a lot of the assets while and without anyone noticing, basically. So it's kind of like an illusion, right? Game environments is an illusion, right? People think, oh my God, there's so many details. And there are, in some environments, a lot of details, but a lot, and I mean an actual lot of those assets are repeating assets, right? That with tricks, with texturing tricks, with material tricks, with a lot of planning while you're modeling, you can get away with a full environment that's all about like modularity, right? And you can see again, I just closed Unreal a few moments ago, but you can see at that environment, if you go back on the stream and you watch that environment, even though it's still noticeable in a few areas here and there, if you mix that with uniquely textured and uniquely modeled models, you can get away with a full modular environment that doesn't look like it's too repeating, too fake, right? So then it's all about design, right? So I wanted to showcase just this I just wanted to throw a bunch of information today because I know it's been a little bit of a big tangent, this whole stream, right? But because it's short, we can't really do like a model from scratch, from zero to hero. Let's say, like as someone was saying on chat. But we can do is I can show you all these sorts of information, how I did this or how I did that. And in case you guys are wondering, I'm also streaming on ZBrush Live. For anyone who wants to pop in and ask questions that weren't answered on this stream, they could just pop in on any of my streams or any of Ian's streams or Paul's streams, because me, Paul, Ian, and Daisuke are back to ZBrush Live to stream regularly. So we have Q&As very often where people could just also come in. If you remember something or you tried to redo whatever I did on this stream, let's say you go back after this stream and you rewatch it and you try to make it yourself or whatever I was doing, and there was a question that popped up, just pop in the next stream that I do, just ask the questions and I'll go on tangents gladly, as you've noticed by this stream. I kind of like the tangents. That's the beauty of this, right? So yeah, any other questions that anyone might have before we wrap this up?
No, there hasn't been any new questions. No, some really nice comments. I look like that warrior. Yes, I do. I'm a bit better looking than him, but he's not bad looking himself anyhow. Yes, so I guess this brings us to the end of this stream. I have to remind everyone that over the next 3 weeks, next week we have the next one, week after that, the third one, and then a fourth. In the fourth one, after all the amazing stuff that Rodolfo is going to show, I'm going to make a little cameo appearance, as if I'm not appearing now. But anyway, I'm going to show a few things we're going to do in Cinema 4D as well, right. Which Rodolfo is then going to use in gaming contexts. And one of them, which is an interesting one, is we're going to create a flipbook texture. Inside Cinema 4D using MoGraph. Yeah, that's going to be fun because it's easy to do. And yeah, I think we've got this one wrapped up.
Yeah,
I'm going to go to the media assets and put on the the end screen. There is a QR code there which may or may not work, but hey, you can try it if you want to go to this link we had. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. See you in a week. If you have any Cinema 4D questions, come tomorrow. Join us at the Ask the Trainer. And Rodolfo, as always, so let me do this. I always like to do this. I'm going to switch around so I can look towards my monitor.
Yeah, because we're looking like...
There we go. That's better.
We were mad at each other until now.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And we're looking forward for the rest of the stuff you're going to show.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you, Rodolfo.
Thank you, everyone. All right, see you around. Bye.